For those that do not know, Louisiana may have the largest land loss crisis in the world. 99% of counties nationwide, regardless of whether you are coastal or inland, have experienced a flood event in the past 30 years. I had the opportunity to work for the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which covers about 19 million people. So let's talk about this as a country all together before we are all in that boat.
And you're listening to A Climate Change. This is Matt Matern, your host, and I've got a great guest on the program, Peter Waggonner. Peter joins us from New Orleans. He is a senior policy advisor for the Greater New Orleans Inc. Welcome to the program, Peter.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for covering New Orleans and our greater ambitions as well.
Yeah, well, I used to live in New Orleans for about 5 years and love the Crescent City and have lots of fond memories of being there. And quite frankly, a little bit of my environmental journey got started in an expose the Wall Street Journal did in the 80s about the oil companies digging canals all through the swamplands of New Orleans and the wetlands and making a hash of the place and dropping all kinds of heavy minerals into the water, and it was just a disaster. And so that certainly raised my consciousness as to those problems really needed to be addressed, and helping that area avert further environmental problems.
Exactly. So we have made a lot of progress as a state since since your time there, Matt. So we have we will not, although we might be slightly more enlightened about the extent of our coastal crisis, really, and solutions towards our coastal crisis. So Louisiana now has a 50-year coastal master plan. It is a $50 billion plan, but the ambition of this plan is that in 50 years we will be at less risk than we are today if all of these projects are implemented and funded. And as part of Greater New Orleans Inc. or GNO Inc's work, we bring together the business community in support of this coastal master plan. So it's really important not just to hear voices of community members and those affected by storms and coastal land loss, even though everyone is, but actually activating that business community, including lots of energy companies stand up in support of this coastal master plan. And actually now, and we can get into this more, but our biggest recurring revenue source for master plan implementation is revenue from energy production offshore. And this is not the case in the 80s.
Right. Well, that is definitely progress. So tell us about the progress that is being made there to kind of stop the coastal erosion, and we all know, or many of us have heard about kind of Chemical Alley down the Mississippi, down from Baton Rouge towards New Orleans, and all the different petrochemical plants along that corridor. And it's a big issue.
Yeah. So of course, when we're talking about the coastal land loss crisis, we also have to think about the incredible industrial facilities that our coast actually protects. So coastal restoration is absolutely essential to protecting private industry, and private industry not only in Louisiana, but if you remember, Hurricane Ida made landfall in Louisiana, then made it all the way up to New York and flooded much of New York. So Louisiana's coast is kind of the first line of defense for life, but not only in Louisiana. The ripple effects are really far and wide. So right now, more money than ever is being dedicated to our coastal program. I believe it is about $1.8 billion this year that the legislature is going to be appropriating towards implementation of our annual plan. So we have a multi-year coastal master plan and an annual plan that talks about what projects would occur that year. So we have...
Is that federal funding or state funding?
It is a mixture. So again, this energy revenue is revenue shared. So it is it's a revenue sharing scheme that was actually not in place until after Hurricane Katrina. So right now, Louisiana or Gulf producing states and local jurisdictions receive 37.5% of revenues of energy produced offshore. And that, again, was not the case until after Katrina. So we missed out on, you know, about 70 years of revenue that we really could have benefited from. And that 37.5% is actually capped. So we've reached that cap, and it still doesn't compare to the 50% that is shared with states that produce oil and gas onshore or on land. So we are fighting. There have been legislative efforts through the RISE and BREEZE Act that would not only lift the cap, but also expand what is shared to include alternate energy production. So offshore wind would be included in what is shared with Gulf producing states. Again, we might be a little bit away from offshore wind farms at scale in the Gulf of Mexico, but we want to get ahead of that and set up a revenue sharing model so that Louisiana and our fellow Gulf states and states like New York, which have seen large lease sales, actually receive some revenue from those lease sales. The lease sales that we have seen in the Atlantic and Pacific and Gulf, the states actually receive $0 from that because there's no revenue sharing in place. And we do not want a situation like what we've experienced in Louisiana, where decades go by and we continue to receive $0 from the incredible energy production that occurs.
So tell us, kind of maybe walk us through what are some of the things that are right on your horizon, and what are, tangible projects that have been completed that have yielded benefits for the area around New Orleans.
That's a great question, Matt. So many of you remember Hurricane Katrina in 2005. It is still to date the costliest natural disaster. There were some predictions that the Palisades fires would overtop that in terms of cost. They have not thus far, though, thankfully. But Hurricane Katrina is still the most expensive natural disaster. After Katrina, New Orleans and the Army Corps of Engineers built a $14.5 billion levee system around the city. Hurricane Katrina was a natural disaster, but it was also a huge engineering failure. So much of New Orleans' levee system was underdesigned and underbuilt, and maybe actively under construction during Katrina, so it was a little bit weaker. And it failed, and 80% of the city flooded. It's the 20-year anniversary of Katrina right now, and it was really important to highlight the incredible strides that we have made since, and what we have to do over the next 20 years to ensure that we continue to improve our infrastructure and install more green infrastructure to continue to reduce our flood risk. But we have built a $14.5 billion levee system, which really has had some major tests already. So again, Hurricane Ida hit just to the west of New Orleans in 2021. It was actually a stronger storm in terms of wind speed when it made landfall than Katrina. And our levee system held perfectly. So Katrina was about a $200 billion disaster, and that those losses were prevented by a $14 billion system. So there is a huge benefit to cost ratio for that project in just one event.
Well, that is a success story. Tell us what is being done to kind of prevent coastal erosion. I've read a little bit about some major projects along the Mississippi, but obviously you're an expert in this area, so why don't you fill us in?
Yeah, so there are many different types of projects in the Coastal Master Plan. Some include diversions, which are redirections of sediment from the river. There are controlled and even natural diversions. So some diversions have opened up on their own and appear to be building land naturally. There are also many other types of projects like shoreline restorations. You can also channel or funnel sediment from a site to restore areas. So we've really seen lots of projects already. The coastal master plan also includes these hardened levees that we see in New Orleans. So CPRA, the Coastal Restoration and Protection Authority in Louisiana, is a sponsor for cost share for some of these large projects that the Corps of Engineers put on. So one project that unfortunately seems like it may be stalled but will have to reemerge is actually larger than Louisiana, and this does affect the entire supply of sediment that we even receive. So it is the Lower Mississippi River Comprehensive Management Study. The Corps kicked this off in 2023. It is supposed to be a 5-year, $25 million study of how the river works, its management all the way from Missouri to the mouth of the river, which is, of course, about 90 miles below New Orleans. And the study is supposed to consider flood protection. It is supposed to consider sediment supply. It's supposed to consider navigation, of course. That is a huge purpose of the Mississippi River and tributaries whole system. So it was a comprehensive look at all of the elements and benefits of the system. Even though it's been kicked off, it looks like it might have to pause next year due to budgetary issues, but hopefully it does resume soon and continue to pave a way about the future management of the issue of the river. And as many people know, so after the Great Flood of 1927, which was a horrific loss, the decision by the federal government in the flood.
Tell us a little bit about the erosion in terms of, has it slowed down? Is there, at what point in time, will there be a turnaround where some of this erosion will kind of go the other way, hopefully, but where are we at in terms of stopping it and, turning the tide?
Matt, that is a great question. I do believe that it has slowed down. We used to say that we lost a football field of land every hour. Now, more recently, we've said a football field of land about every 100 minutes. And now we really don't, we don't have a definitive stat like that. But keep in mind that that land loss was due to a multitude of factors, of course. Now we have to consider the additional challenges of saltwater intrusion and sea level rise. So it's really hard to say that we have tapered off. Much of what the coastal program intends to do is just stabilize us, is to look at where can we build barrier islands and where can we build projects just to maintain the land that we have now. So that's a great question, but a little bit hard to answer. And there are so many variables at play, unfortunately.
So tell us, I've read about the saltwater intrusion, and that's a big risk factor, is that the saltwater is coming up the mouth of the Mississippi close to the intake valves for where the city of New Orleans gets their fresh water and processes it. Tell us more about that risk and what is being done to mitigate it.
Yeah, that is a great question. And for everyone's reference, the costs and have cleaner, safer water for decades or centuries to come. So that is a consideration. And again, we do have to consider that New Orleans, while ratepayers will certainly pay for water service to offset much of those costs, we have to advocate that maybe the federal government should chip in some accord, because we are draining 31 states and drinking.
Right. Well, it sounded like, is my recollection, that there was some issue as to the navigability of the river because of the loss of volume down the river, which kind of seems mind-boggling to anybody who's seen the Mississippi River and how big and how wide and how powerful that river is, to think that it got low enough where it potentially wasn't navigable is a bit mind-blowing. And if that's not evidence of climate change, I don't know what is.
And it's almost less mind-blowing or more mind-blowing when you consider how large these vessels are these days and how many containers you could stack on top of each other. And you have to consider that these are not just the ships that you imagine that are trying to navigate the river, but these are huge ships that, again, are essential to international trade, really. So a whole other conversation. But Louisiana is our part of New Orleans is building the Louisiana International Terminal further downriver that actually allows for even larger ships to make it up the river, and it will include space for advanced manufacturing and warehousing and distribution. So a really exciting initiative and huge greenfield port development that is incredibly important to our economy in Southeast Louisiana, and again, incredibly important to international trade. We actually not only do we have an issue sometimes when the river is low, but we have you may remember the Crescent City connection. It's kind of the bridge that goes from the East Bank to the West Bank in New Orleans. But that bridge is the draft is too low for these huge, huge, huge ships that want to make it to New Orleans to thus connect to Middle America and places to the west and east of us. So we are working on a huge new port facility to accommodate that demand.
Well, it's a lot on your plate. So tell us, how did you get here? What was your path to this place and being an environmental and advocate for sustainability?
Great question. And it really does always go back to Katrina for me. So Katrina occurred when I was 12, which was a huge, devastating loss for our city. Our population's still down about 20%, which creates a huge crisis in terms of how much revenue we can generate locally to fix our ever-growing problems and deferred maintenance on infrastructure. But that wake-up call at 12 was, for me personally, a blessing because it did provide a calling and a purpose that I have been blessed personally to have ever since then for about 2 decades now. So I have been interested in the environment and economy because Katrina not only really amplified coastal land loss when it made landfall and hit our wetlands. It also shut down an economy that is necessary for the world. Oil and gas prices spiked across the country, and trade was paused. It was supposed to be paused for months and months and months, but I think the port got reopened in about 8 days. So really understanding the interconnection between the environment and economy was a gift that I received at a pretty early age. And my first job out of college was working for a city council district that includes the upper Ninth Ward. Some of y'all might remember the lower Ninth Ward, which had some really devastating impacts. But this council district that I worked for had some of the hardest hit neighborhoods in New Orleans after Katrina. And again, it was a challenge of a lifetime and a blessing of a lifetime to work with about 80,000 constituents who were still recovering from Katrina a decade after at that point. So working with everyday people on the pothole in front of their street, which was really probably like a drain line failure, and really understanding what's happening, how municipal infrastructure works, and how it is old and how it needs to be replaced, and how we should probably be replacing it with a technology that doesn't even really exist yet. So working in City Hall in New Orleans was another great privilege and challenge.
Well, tell us a little bit about the changes, if any, that you've experienced in the first 120 days or 150 days of the Trump administration, and how that's changed anything on the ground in New Orleans and the problems that you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just for context, GNO Inc. Again, Greater New Orleans Inc. We're just the regional economic development organization for Southeast Louisiana. However, GNO Inc. is really an incredible player in state and federal policy. So in 2013, GNO Inc. formed the Coalition for Sustainable Flood Insurance. The acronym is CSFI. You can visit us at csfi.info and sign up to be a member of our coalition. So this coalition includes about 800 contacts across the country advocating for the availability of flood insurance through NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, and affordability of flood insurance through NFIP, and the incentivization of mitigation through the National Flood Insurance Program. So through New Orleans, I've had the opportunity to bring together this coalition, which again is a incredible privilege. Um, and we have to do this at the federal level, of course, because FEMA oversees NFIP. NFIP was created in 1968. It started in HUD, then moved over to FEMA. So, with that said, the FEMA Review Council that President Trump set up by executive order, either on his first day or first week, is greatly important to the future of NFIP. So this review council is not explicitly tasked with considering reforms to NFIP, but NFIP is in need of reform to make it just a more sustainable program, of course. So NFIP, the most urgent and pressing challenge is always reauthorizing NFIP. So this National Flood Insurance Program, which covers 4.7 million Americans, is only, for the most part, authorized on a short-term basis. So its authorization is set to expire on September 30th, 2025. So we are hoping for a longer-term authorization of NFIP, as well as many additional reforms that encourage flood insurance participation by policyholders, the affordability of the program, and the program's value in incentivizing flood mitigation, of course.
I'm kind of surprised that it only covers 4.7 million people, because it seems like there are more people that live along the coast than that. And if you count the entire country, it seems like a lot of people live very close to the coast.
Matt, that is, I'm glad you called that out. So the fact is that 99% of counties nationwide, regardless of whether you are coastal or inland, have experienced a flood event in the past 30 years. So that translates to all but 2 congressional districts have had a federally declared disaster. So we really, we totally agree that 4.7 people is not sufficient in participating in this program. NFIP actually used to have 5.7 million participants at its peak around 2008 or 2009. So we've seen participation fall off, and we have seen FEMA try to generate more revenue through premium increases through what was called Risk Rating 2.0, which went into effect in 2021 and increased premiums nationwide. So those premium increases has led to almost a 5% decrease in participation over the past 3 years. So this new methodology and the importance of being covered by flood insurance is certainly a goal of our coalition to educate and inform really as many people around the country as we can.
Well, it seems though like every homeowner in Florida should have flood insurance, given the fact that they're getting hit by hurricanes pretty much every year.
So that is another great point. And Florida is really what's keeping participation in the program afloat. So if you've heard of Florida's Citizens program, this is basically its insurer of last resort. It's the state-run insurance program in Florida that is growing in, or was growing in participation, because there was private insurers were not really writing in Florida. So now, if you have a Citizens policy, the state will require you, this is state law, to have flood insurance as well. And Florida alone accounts for almost 1.8 million of the 4.7 million NFIP policies. So you have states that only have about 5,000 policies. Meanwhile, Florida has about 1.8 million policies. So
definitely a step in the right direction, and they should be probably at 20 million, but who's,
but you have certainly identified a need that the Florida legislature apparently agrees with.
Okay, well, we're on the same page there. Well, tell us a bit about what you see in the future as far as positive developments and things that you're kind of keep you awake at night.
2 really exciting prospects on the horizon. One is another NSF engine proposal called the Disaster Reduction Initiative, or DRI, DRI, as an acronym. So this initiative, again, it is about 140 partners and collaborators from across Louisiana, and again, across public and private sector, to develop and commercialize technologies that look at risk reduction. And it's the goal of this initiative is to develop technologies that can inform decisions that a property owner would make in terms of how to mitigate their property and what types of insurance benefits that they would receive. It would also inform how catastrophes are modeled. It would also inform how construction occurs and how construction is monitored to ensure that these mitigation measures are installed appropriately. It's a really, really exciting initiative that is being led by LSU Ag Center, actually, and is trying to not only reduce our risk in Louisiana, but build our digital media and technology economy and our startup ecosystem. So really exciting to see entrepreneurs, hopefully, if NSF does fund this proposal, get an inroads into thinking about how they can use their entrepreneurial minds and technology skills to bring together risk mitigation and insurance and some tools that would be useful to Louisianians and products that might be useful to the country and the world.
Well, you've mentioned two LSU initiatives and no Tulane initiative, so I'm a little concerned about this and wonder if my alma mater is falling down or you're just pro LSU. I don't know.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Tulane is an exceptional partner in New Orleans and ever more so. So Tulane is working on, I think they're partners probably on both of those grants actually as part of the huge coalitions. But they're also working on their bio district initiative. I don't know if you've been back in town recently, but all extending up Canal Street is a new medical corridor and is now the new bio district in New Orleans. That is not innovating insurance and risk reduction technologies, but more bioscience technologies, like things I don't even understand, like nerves on a chip. But really, really cool ecosystem that Tulane is building in New Orleans, and that's just one of the many things that they're doing.
Well, it's good to hear they're on top of something. Well, thank you for being on the show. It's been great talking with you, Peter, and best of luck in doing the work that you're doing. And we'll follow you on social media and try to keep track of that work. And tell us where people can find you and contribute to what you're doing.
Absolutely. So one thing that we will be working on in the future is thinking about multiple perils. So in the U.S. we have NFIP, which is a federal solution to flood insurance, and it provides flood insurance. But we do need to think about how we include more risks in more places to spread risk and make it more affordable to have insurance coverage and incentivize mitigation measures at scale across the country and across risks. So that is to say that our Coalition for Sustainable Flood Insurance will be looking at more than just flood. You can visit our coalition's website right now at csfi.info. And please do reach out if you'd like to learn more about our initiatives around flood insurance, and sooner than later, our initiatives to consider what it would look like to address multiple perils, like 12 other countries are doing right now. So that is a study we are undertaking and would love to involve any listeners in.
Well, tell us a little bit about the multiple perils, just briefly, just so that we're all a little bit more educated than we were when we started.
Yeah. So as mentioned, we have only about 4.7 million participants in the National Flood Insurance Program. We see that decreasing. Meanwhile, we see more and more people go uninsured entirely in terms of their homeowners insurance. So about 13% of homeowners have no insurance nationally now, which is up from like 5% in 2019. So it's really stark and startling how these premium increases everywhere. We talk about insurance a lot in California, in Louisiana, and Florida, but shockingly, you see Nebraska and Colorado and Iowa have the largest premium increases. So this NatCat effort tries to think about risks across perils. So if I'm talking to Nebraska, they might shrug me off if I'm just talking about flood, but they may understand cyclone or convective storm or other risks. So we have to consider all perils, and the only way to really get out of an insurance problem is to mitigate against our risk and to spread our risk wider across perils, so we do not have concentrations in terms of geography and concentrations in terms of specific perils. So the goal is to figure out what the benefits of that would be in terms of savings for the federal government in disaster response, and really how the private insurance market would benefit from this, because the private insurance market is responding largely to reinsurance costs, which is a global reinsurance market that private insurers in the U.S. have to deal with, and these global reinsurance costs are increasing dramatically. They've gone up over 100% in the past few years. So we have to figure out what federal intervention makes sense in terms of stabilizing the private insurance market, thus stabilizing the real estate market, and thus saving the federal government money at the end of the day. So because fewer people will go uninsured, and hopefully fewer people will just take their risk as a given, and they'd be more incentivized to actually mitigate against the risk if they are told that if they are to, whether it's installing a fortified roof or implementing some flood-proofing mechanism, that they would receive a discount that is reliable on their annual insurance premium.
Yeah, it is a huge problem, and it's getting worse and worse. You hear about insurance premiums going up like $7,000 for a house versus what it used to be of maybe under $1,000, or so it's just kind of crazy. And the fact that it's now 13% of all homeowners that don't have insurance is quite frankly shocking, and sounds like it's going to probably continue to go up as these prices go up and people just can't afford to pay the bill.
Yeah, I just read that there's some zip codes in Florida where the average premium is over $40,000 a year. Let's talk about this as a country altogether before we are all in that boat.
Yeah, wow, 40,000. That's just insane. So yeah, so many people just can't afford to pay that kind of premium. So yeah, maybe the insurance industry or the problems with insurance are finally going to shock people into, hey, we've got to do something about climate change because it is real and it's costing us $40,000 a year. That it's like real money.
Exactly. The insurance is, in our minds, the pocketbook issue that really motivates any property owner or any renter to consider the effects of climate change in the near term. And insurance could be the motivating factor to actually reduce our climate risk. So we are hopeful in that regard.
Okay. Well, Peter, thanks for your great work being on the front lines there in New Orleans, and enjoy a po' boy for all of us who aren't there, and we'll keep in touch.
Yes, everything that everyone is doing is helping coastal Louisiana. So please thank all of your guests for us.
Okay, will do. Everybody tune in next week, and we'll look forward to having another great guest on the program. To learn more about our work at A Climate Change and how you can help us reach our goal of planting 30,000 trees in the Amazon this year, visit aclimatechange.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. See you next time.